todas, todes e todos. Good evening. Marhaba. Então a gente vai iniciar agora a quarta edição do Seminário Internacional Universidade em Transformação, Políticas de Ações Afirmativas na Pós-Graduação e Direitos Humanos, né? Um seminário que a gente promove anualmente. E o tema de hoje, o debate de hoje, vai ser sobre interdisciplinaridade, direitos humanos, né, e justiça epistêmica. Então, Interdisciplinarity, Epistemic Justice and Human Rights. Eu vou fazer a apresentação do professor Adam Nocek, vai ser a primeira fala, né, em inglês. A gente vai ter um debate aqui plurilingüe, né? E então o professor Adam Nocek, ele é professor associado em Philosophy of Technology and Science and Technology Studies na School of Arts, Media and Engineering, na Arizona State University. Ele é diretor fundador do Centro de Tecnologias Filosóficas, né? O Center for Philosophical Technologies, tendo sido o primeiro vice-presidente da Sociedade para Literatura, Ciência e Artes, a Society for Literature, Science and the Arts, a SLSA. Entre as suas publicações, destacam-se trabalhos que abordam temas da mídia e da ciência, de filosofia especulativa, especialmente em consonância com Alfred North Whitehead, filosofia do design e teorias críticas e especulativas da mídia computacional. Seu trabalho explora a intersecção das humanidades, do design e da tecnologia. Então, seja muito bem-vindo, professor Adam Nocek. You are most welcome, Professor Adam Nocek. So please feel free to speak.
Perfect. Thank you, Paulo, and also thank you, Artur, for having me here. This is a really nice opportunity to speak with you all. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. So basically, well, first of all, thank you for doing that introduction, Paulo. I catch a little bit of the Portuguese, maybe the things that sounded a bit like English. So I won't do an introduction for myself. But today, I mean, this is really an opportunity to talk about the kind of collaboration that we're really fortunate at the SLSA, or Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, to have with the University of Sao Paulo. So really what I'm going to do here today is sort of outline a little bit for you all, maybe a little bit about the history of the society, its sort of multi and transdisciplinary nature, say a few things maybe about how the organization has evolved, some of the things that it offers, what the conferences and venues and so forth, what we've been doing over the years, and also opportunities for growth. So I'm not really going to dig into sort of a lot of the deeper epistemic and ontological questions. I think these are the things maybe that can come out in the conversation or the debate, because right now I'm speaking on my official capacity as vice president, and I can't speak on behalf of everybody. So I'll just talk about the society. So in terms of the society's history, actually the society, I mean, broadly, it fosters what it calls a multidisciplinary study of the relations among literature, language, the arts, science, medicine, and technology. It was actually founded in 1985 at the University of California in Berkeley, and has been sort of going ever since. I could say that although this isn't really on the website or so on, there are a lot of original members, you could say, from the original cohort of people who founded the society. Most of them, you could say, were operating sort of at the intersection of literature and science. In fact, the arts was only a recent addition. It was originally called the SLS, so Society for Literature and Science, for folks who, I mean, you have scientists, so for example, physicists and molecular biologists and chemists and so forth, who are reading science fiction, who were reading Philip K. Dick, who were reading, different ways of thinking about how it is that the production of scientific facts might have, for example, a literary and cultural dimension, but also how it is that fiction might be very important for the scientific endeavor in the first place. And then you also had humanists, so people coming from the humanities and social sciences who were deeply interested in the sciences and not isolating themselves and not saying that culture is over here and science is over there, but really trying to break down a lot of the science culture binaries, and in many ways sort of at the heart of the culture wars, if you like, between science on the one side and culture on the other. So since then, I guess you could say the SLSA has grown rapidly, and it has a yearly convention or the SLSA conference, which is what's you will all be playing host to, and it really brings together, I guess, historically participants from many different disciplines, including history, sociology, anthropology, rhetoric, philosophy of science, technology, medicine, literary history and criticism, art history and media studies, and so on and so forth. It's also important to note that this is not simply for humanities scholars and humanities and social scientific scholars looking to the sciences. Also, we have a good deal of physicists, biologists, engineers, and so on, who are very curious with what's happening in the arts and humanities, who also give presentations as well. So that's kind of important to note. One of the things that the SLSA is very proud of is its journal configurations. It's a journal of literature, science, and technology, or that's the official title. It's published by Johns Hopkins University Press. It publishes 3 issues per year, and it has an extremely competitive acceptance rate. So it's a very competitive journal. Yeah, and it's been in existence since 1993. This is members of the SLSA are the editors, and it has been run by the SLSA, but published by Johns Hopkins University Press. I mean, officially, the journal says configuration explores the relations of literature and the arts to the sciences and technology. You can actually take a screenshot if you want of the configurations website. We're actually very proud to, I guess you could say, boast a lot of new and emerging scholars as well. It's not only for established scholars. There are a number of people who are coming, sort of postdocs and young junior faculty. But of course, it has published works by Donna Haraway, Bruno Latour, people like this. It's established in that way. So it's actually a really good opportunity for members of the SLSA community to get their work out in the larger international community. What else can I say? So as I said, the SLSA sponsors an annual conference, and the recent meetings have been in West Lafayette, Indiana, which has been it was at Purdue University in 2022, Tempe, Arizona, at Arizona State University, which is where I'm based, and Dallas, Texas. And also at Dallas, Texas was Southern Methodist University, and Corvallis was Oregon State University. We also have a sister organization, which is the European Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts. It's very similar to the US-based, but also international SLSA. But the European Society functions semi-autonomously, but there's a lot of overlap as well. So a lot of people who frequent the SLSA in the United States or in the Americas also go to the European conference as well. I think one of the most exciting things about the SLSA right now, and this is sort of gets into the SLSA present, if you like, is really how diverse its organization in terms of its structure, the actual conference and the event. It's not simply an academic conference where we have overlapping chaired panels, which we have plenty of those. I would say on average, a big conference can go as large as over 500 people. A smaller conference can be about 150. So it's anywhere in that range. But we have chaired panels, which are usually concurrent. We have roundtables, workshops, keynotes, art exhibitions, film screenings, live performances, and of course, food and beverage. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. One of the things that's pretty cool, though, is that it sort of offers now multiple points of entry into something as diverse as a Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, right? Automatically, I mean, people, when I say that I'm the vice president of the Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, they usually go, literature, science, and the arts. Okay, where do I even begin? Is this simply for humanists? Is this for scientists? Is this for literary people? Is this for artists? And I like to say it's all of them and more. So as a result, and as the society has grown, we had to offer more points of access. So roundtables. Roundtables are a great way to have more informal presentations where you might assemble 10, even as many as 10 people who have a sort of proposition, for example, or just want to get together and have a conversation about a topic. Workshops are structured in a variety of ways. Sometimes they are workshopping a book, a paper, a theme, and so on. And sometimes they're actually much more driven by arts and design, where you actually are learning a craft or a skill. We've had performance workshops. We've had people learning how to use a new technology in performance, haptic workshops. Of course, we have our typical keynotes. Art exhibitions have also become a very, very important component in the SLSA in the last, I'd say, well, since mid 2010s, the art exhibitions are more and more prominent. I could say that I've run 2 of these conferences myself. At both conferences, we had dedicated spaces for art exhibitions where we had some members from the SLSA community who are already artists bringing their work in, and they often intersect with the sciences, but certainly do not have to, but often have a sort of epistemic or ecological justice sort of bent to them. I think that's quite important, especially recently. And I mean, we could talk more about this in the question and answer and conversation about what art really means to a society that is very, very invested in the sciences, but thinking about the sciences pluralistically. How do we think about plural epistemologies when it comes to the sciences in the natural world? Film screenings have also been a very important component in recent years as well. So a number of our members are artists who produce film, and we had a screening, for example, or I think it was actually the world premiere of a film from the Canadian Board of Arts and something or other that was filmed at the SLSA in 2023, and that was a huge success. Live performances as well, where there are different kinds of interruptions and provocations that happen throughout the conferences, and of course food and beverage, and I'll talk about that and how important that is to the organization as well, because we do like to think about the SLSA as not just a conference, but also I like to think of it, and maybe some of my colleagues would debate it, but I like to think of it more like a festival where there's a sort of annual coming together of people who haven't seen each other for over a year, but who again have multiple ways of connecting and multiple entry points. So things happening throughout the 3 to 4 day period. So some of the specifics, in case you're interested, because I know probably some of you, I know some of you are interested in the organization and how these things, what it actually looks like at the SLSA. We always have concurrent panels, and we usually have one keynote per day. And then throughout every day, historically, the conference has gone on Thursday to Sunday, but some of this there's lots of wiggle room in there. But workshops, art, and screenings, film screenings, are spread throughout every day. So you have concurrent panels, and sometimes you have film screenings and so on. We also have coffee, breakfast, and snacks provided every day. Apologies, I just lost that. And these are more logistical things about one business lunch and one SLSA board member organizer lunch and so on. That's kind of boring stuff. And then there's also a Saturday evening dinner and party. So SLSA the kind of look of the SLSA is a bit like this. This is the poster we came up with, and we had a whole sort of ad campaign that went along with the SLSA in 2023. The topic was broad. It was alien. And alien it wasn't alien. There was no colon. There was no sub anything. It was just alien. And what we were thinking about when we organized this is that the desert, because I'm from Arizona State University, we are in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, and the desert is a kind of alien landscape. So we have also a very, very large school of sustainability at Arizona State University. So we were thinking about the alien landscapes of the desert, but we were also and simultaneously thinking about what had been deemed politically illegal aliens. So we were thinking about different forms of alien, and we were also thinking about Marxist frames of alienation. So we brought all three of these together. Of course, there also emerged throughout the course of the conference different ways of thinking about the alien within algorithms, people thinking about how AIs are alien forms of intelligence. And we had a number of panels and streams that were addressing the sort of alien within the unknown forms of intelligence within algorithms. So as you can see, these conferences are structured broadly to encourage multiple points of entry, but also I think allowing for incredibly productive debate. I mean, I would say most people attending this conference approach the question of alien from a kind of post-human, critical humanities, speculative humanities perspective, but that's not the only way people were approaching it. Our keynotes were very, I think, representative of the topic. We had one well-known Afrofuturist author. She was a Nnedi Okorafor, who is also a professor of practice at Arizona State University. So we drew on some local talent, and she's sort of become an international sensation, but she does sort of situate herself within the sort of Afrofuturist genre. We also had the physicist the physicist Sarah Walker, she works on alien life, and then we also had a physicist turned feminist, new materialist scholar Karen Barad. Some of you might be familiar with their work. So all three of them were speaking to this theme of the alien. You can see her here also. We have, sort of typical sort of stuff, our registration desk. Everything was themed in sort of green, fluorescent green coloring, a la the alien. And we also, I was going to collect some more pictures, but I didn't really want to bore you with all these. But we also have lots of signage and so on. Another thing to sort of think about is, and very important, is or we call it the salsa party, like salsa dancing, but the SLSA party. This is a we are apparently, and Carol Colatrella, who is the sort of executive director of the SLSA. Very sad to not be here, but she definitely told me to make sure I tell you that SLSA was also, I believe, the first conference to have a party, at least in the North American context, to have a party that is absolutely mandatory for every conference. You usually have a live band, happens on Saturday night. And this one was actually, we did have a salsa band, and it was very well attended. And then we went to the wee hours of the morning where we had a DJ afterwards. I think we didn't end up cleaning up till about 3 a.m. So that was it was a good time. It's usually a very nice way for everybody to let off steam, but everybody comes together and so on. I'm sure you can understand. I'll sort of close out with We'll have a couple more slides, but things to be thinking about. And I know logistically, we can sort of talk about some of this stuff later on as it gets closer to the organization. But I've organized 2 of these conferences, and these are things that I definitely need to be thinking about. Is team members, I would say, are the most important component. That I've had that were very important. I had a sort of army of volunteers of just unbelievable people who pulled this event off, and I'm sure you guys will as well. Securing venues, directions, maps, transportation, especially if we're thinking this is an international conference, people coming from everywhere throughout Brazil, South America, Latin America, but also North America. This is super important. Website, text. The website's actually pretty important as well. Everyone has their own sort of website that they manage where you can do all sorts of live updates. So that's become, all these logistical things are incredibly important to pulling off the SLSA. And sort of moving into SLSA futures. I think it's an exciting time for the SLSA right now. The organization is diversifying. I think in the sort of 90s and 2000s, what you saw is a lot of established scholars of a sort of older generation. And I think that's important, of course, for the sort of longevity and the sort of tradition of an organization. But what you have, especially in the post-COVID era, is younger members, graduate students and junior faculty. Looking at the numbers in terms of membership, but also participation in conferences, you have a lot of junior faculty. So tenure track faculty, lecturers, but PhD students, master's students. We've even had a few undergraduates, I believe, attend. And also coming from different fields, from the arts, design, and creative fields. This has become really, really important. And I think that the SLSA has a new sort of vibrancy and energy precisely because of that. Because you have an increasing number of artists who want to deal with sort of ecologies, social and political ecologies, questions. Of course, this conference is addressing epistemic justice and, epistemic plurality and so forth. This is becoming increasingly important to the arts. And we're seeing this at the SLSA conference, and we really want to foster that and offer spaces for them to engage. This is why workshops are really important as well. And we also have noticed, and this is kind of I don't know if this is good or bad, but SLSA is, it's a vibrant community, as I've said, but it's also attracting frustrated people, people frustrated at typical academic conferences. We have a lot of spillover from, especially in North America, from other conferences and people who are sort of frustrated at, I guess you could say, traditional disciplinary silos. Traditional ways that conferences are organized, where it's only panels and presentations, and senior scholars telling what junior scholars to think. And so you have a lot of people spilling over from other organizations who have found their home at the SLSA, and we absolutely welcome them. So I think these are all opportunities for the future, and we definitely think that, this is one of the reasons that we're really, really happy to be collaborating with University of Sao Paulo. And we think this is a perfect place to be imagining SLSA futures. So this is kind of where I'm going to stop. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your presentation. Once Brazil, and specifically the University of Sao Paulo and our graduate program on humanities, rights, and other legitimacies is going to host the next conference in August 2026, between the 25th and the 29th. I'm sure you're going to talk more about it during this panel. So I thank you very much. I'm going to give the word to Professor Artur Matuck, and then we can talk a little bit more about SLSA and next year's conference and the importance of interdisciplinarity, epistemic justice, and human rights. Professor Artur Matuck, né? Apesar de dispensar apresentações, a gente gosta de mencionar um pouco da trajetória dele. A trajetória mais completa dele está no site do nosso programa de pós-graduação em Humanidades, Direitos e Outras Legitimidades, né? Que é o principal organizador desse seminário de hoje, também com o envolvimento do Núcleo de Apoio Brasil-África, do NAP Brasil-África, também com a participação do grupo Diálogos Interculturais do Instituto de Estudos Avançados. O Instituto de Estudos Avançados tem sido um parceiro, né, na organização da Conferência Internacional do ano que vem, como eu mencionei, que vai ocorrer em agosto, de 25 a 29 de agosto de 2026, na USP, também com alguns eventos externos, com algumas exposições e alguns eventos acontecendo pela cidade de São Paulo. E aí, brevemente, eu recordo que o professor Artur Matuck, ele é livre docente em comunicações, né, e pela Escola de Comunicação e Artes da USP, onde ele é professor, né. Ele também atua no nosso programa de pós-graduação em Humanidades, Direitos e Outras Legitimidades, tanto como professor, com várias disciplinas importantes, quanto orientador, né? E a gente tem um descritivo maior ali no site, no Instagram, em outras mídias do nosso PPG-HDL. Então, eu passo a palavra ao professor Artur Matuck, seja muito bem-vindo.
Obrigado, Paulo, por essa apresentação, pela essa oportunidade de eu poder falar aqui. E eu preparei um texto, né, assim, que eu gostaria de ler em inglês e comentando. E o Paulo sugeriu que eu pudesse ir também comentando em português. So I could change from English to Portuguese. Because eu imagino que nem todas as pessoas aqui presentes falam inglês perfeitamente. Eu não sei. Isso eu não sei. Mas
ótimo, Matuck, excelente a sua proposta de você fazer essa translinguagem aí, né? De passar do português para o inglês, do inglês para o português. Fique muito à vontade, uma ótima proposta.
Tá. Então, eu vou pôr um texto aqui para compartilhar com vocês. So, this is the research I have done like few days ago actually, and then I am very enthusiastic about epistemic justice and also epistemic, the discussion of epistemic injustice. Quer dizer, tanto a justiça como a injustiça epistêmica, né? E o que esse texto discute na verdade, seria uma chamada para uma reflexão diante do paradigma da exclusão. A call for reflection in the face of the paradigm of exclusion. The increasing harm against nature evidenced by drastic consequences for human populations imposes a reflective opening on the way of acting morally in relation to the environment. For 25 centuries, ethics has been dedicated to ordering human action. Quer dizer, aqui esse texto vem da minha pesquisa, né? Isso aí não é propriamente todas as frases são minhas, não é só a orientação. Por 25 séculos, a ética esteve focada na ação humana e de um certo modo, ignorou o ambiente, o animal. Espera aí que eu não estou conseguindo movimentar a tela, não sei porquê. Espera aí, eu tenho que me movimentar aqui de um certo modo aqui. Espera aí um pouquinho. Ok. Ok. Então, eu não vou ler palavra por palavra. I'm not going to be reading every word. Okay. So, is this readable for you, for all of you? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Since environmental ethics emerged in the early 70s, it has challenged antropocentrism, né? O centro no homem, no ser humano, tentando resolver, attempting to resolve the issues of human action. Traditional ethical reflection focused primarily on human integrity and the relationships between human beings. But nowadays, this has been changing. It is considered, this traditional ethics is considered insufficient before new environmental problems. And human beings are beginning to consider other living and non-living beings as objects of moral investigation. So I think this is a big change. The contemporary ecological crisis, it should not be separated from an epistemological crisis that is rooted in anthropocentrism. And also, I heard this word for the first time recently, androcentrismo. Quer dizer, além do antropocêntrico, existe também o androcêntrico, que é o centrado no macho, no homem, em oposição à mulher. The field of knowledge historically built on the premise of an exclusive logos relegated the non-human world to a passive position as an inert object to be dominated. So, so here we have the Cartesian Newtonian scientific model, which is the central axis of traditional science, epistemology, even human sciences. So what we need to do is to challenge this paradigm, which has been dominant beyond our understanding beyond our consciousness. Ou seja, esse paradoxo é tão dominante que nós mesmos não nos damos conta de como esse paradigma, né? Não é paradoxo, é paradigma, como que ele domina todo o nosso pensamento. Mas hoje em dia está sendo contestado em muitas áreas, né? I think it will be interesting to hear Adam Nocek to talk about this, if he could, because I see that this paradigm is being challenged in human sciences, in arts, in philosophy, but not as much in science itself. So that will be a question that I will address Adam in a while. Okay, so bioethics. I first heard about bioethics when I was a student in California, University of California in San Diego. And I remember that time I was already a vegetarian, and I heard this big lecture about bioethics that did not mention animals at all. And I dare to ask, say, why not animals? Why animals are not part of bioethics? And I remember that the professors on the table, which are many of them, like several professors, they found what I was saying pretty strange. They could not understand why animals should be part of bioethics. But nowadays, I think bioethics, animal ethics, it's being considered part of bioethics more and more. So here's an interesting division in environmental ethics. Now, we can say anthropocentric, uma ética ambiental antropocêntrica afirma a predominância do homem, né? Quando o ambiente deve ser preservado, porque de outro modo, se não fosse preservado, o ser humano estaria prejudicado. That means the environment should be preserved because otherwise human beings will be jeopardized. Mas, however, another venue, another direction of environmental ethics will say that we should preserve the environment because of non-human living entities, and not only animals, but also the plants, the environment, the rivers, the forests, which is called physiocentrism, which I found a really interesting term, uma terminologia muito interessante. So there is a development of ecocentric ethics and deep ecology. Let's see, I would like to go a little faster. And then what do we need to make these changes? And the change should be moral, ethical, scientific, philosophical, artistic, literary, and legal, sociocultural, political. It should involve everything, basically, every area. of knowledge. And I think epistemic injustice as the main theme of the conference in next year at the USP, it's calling for interdisciplinarity, and I think it's bringing law and the history of law, and justice, and como nós podemos pensar a justiça, o direito, também como parte da ciência, do conhecimento, da pesquisa. Então, there is a term called MEI, which stands for multi-species epistemic injustice. It was outlined by Miranda Fricker. Epistemic injustice describes the harm suffered by an individual or group in their capacity as a knower. A injustiça epistêmica descreve o prejuízo que um indivíduo ou um grupo sofre em sua capacidade de conhecer. Então, we think that this is really fundamental for the university. And the University of São Paulo itself, it's in a process of constant change. And as well, we all know arts, writing, literature, philosophy, sociology, human sciences in Brazil are changing because indigenous people, Black people are being more and more considerate, and also handicapped people, and also animals, and also rivers, and also forests. So speciesism, it's this very, very widespread concept that says that that reinforces the rights and privileges of humans over animals, but also the privilege of man over woman, the privilege of human beings over trees, or over fishes, over cows, and so on. So a very interesting question is scientific rationality should be restricted to human beings, or there should be a rationality come from nature. There should be a rationality come from animals. And the question is, this phrase I think is really brilliant. In the multi-species domain, the gap lies in the systemic failure of the human epistemic community to develop adequate categories and conceptual resources to codify the experience and complex non-verbal communication of nature. Então, numa tradução rápida, né? No domínio da multiespécie, né? A diferença, né? Não é bem diferença, a falha está numa deficiência sistemática da comunidade epistêmica humana de desenvolver categorias adequadas e recursos conceptuais para codificar a experiência e a complexa comunicação não verbal da natureza. Então, eu acho uma questão muito interessante. A ciência deveria ouvir os não humanos? Bom, aqui, conceitos correlacionados, né? O epistemicídio, que a gente vê muito acontecer no Brasil contra os indígenas, contra os quilombos, né? As comunidades negras, né? Epistemicide, it's very common in Brazil against indigenous people and black people, but also worldwide. The fundamental damage caused by this paradigm is the ontological annulment of the non-human source of knowledge, perpetuating anthropocentrism. Quer dizer, o prejuízo fundamental causado por esse paradigma que exclui a natureza, o animal, o planeta como uma fonte de conhecimento é a anulação ontológica da fonte de conhecimento não humana, perpetuando o antropocentrismo. Essa injustiça não está restrita à esfera individual, mas ocorre no nível estrutural, requerendo reformas cognitivas e políticas. This injustice is not restricted to the individual sphere, but occurs at structural levels. Well, I'm not sure how long more could I go, or if I should go. I think this is the main part, actually. Fala, Paulo.
Não, ia só dizer que se você quiser falar mais 3 a 5 minutos para a gente ir para o debate, fique à vontade. So if you want to talk like 3 to 5 minutes and then we can have a short discussion, feel free, please.
Okay, well, for me, this concept of that animals and plants could provide knowledge, could be enunciators of knowledge. For me, it's very new. I think it's very challenging. And I imagine a term which I call exoscience, which will be like the contrary of endogenous science. Uma ciência que não ficasse restrita apenas ao conhecimento gerado pelo ser humano, né? E então o ser humano seria desafiado a entender a cultura do animal, o conhecimento que vem do animal e também a fala, o conhecimento, a cultura silenciosa que vem das plantas. E eu acho que isso tem uma ressonância com as culturas ancestrais das tribos do mundo inteiro, do xamanismo, né? E que muitas vezes é revelado pelas plantas enteogênicas, como a jurema, a ayahuasca, né? So I think that's very relevant to consider that animals could collaborate and the plants could collaborate with human science, with human understanding of the planet. And in fact, we could think that humans are just one of the beings on the planet. It's not the sole being to inhabit here. And in fact, if we think like Ailton Krenak, which is this indigenous Brazilian intellectual, he say, the river is my grandfather. And this seems like such a poetic, literary metaphor, but actually we could also consider as a real thing, because before human beings, there was water. Before human beings, the planet was here, the water was here, the land was here. So we are intertwined. So this is the idea that we should not only try to protect the environment on our behalf, but also on the behalf of other beings. And bring knowledge to a whole new level in which knowledge from other beings will be brought to the scene of science, and how we should do that, how we could do that. Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk with all of you. Thank you so much.
Muito bom, agradeço também ao professor Artur Matuck. Eu aproveito para recordar que o professor Artur Matuck, eu e a professora Silvia Dantas vamos ministrar a disciplina Inscrever a Justiça Epistêmica, Pesquisas e Práticas em Teorias e Histórias do Conhecimento, no primeiro semestre de 2026, às quartas-feiras, às 19 horas. Vai ser uma disciplina online, so I'm just reminding everyone that we are going to have this course on epistemic justice the first semester of 2026, so everyone is more than welcome. A intenção é que a gente possa fazer uma discussão, uma imersão nesse conceito de justiça epistêmica com base numa bibliografia que integra pensadoras e pensadores, tanto clássicos quanto contemporâneos, com ênfase em autoras e autores do sul global, em pensadoras dessa relação humano-animal, com a intenção também de identificar, analisar e propor soluções para essas injustiças epistêmicas presentes na produção e na validação do conhecimento. Então vão ser abordados temas como colonialidade do saber, interseccionalidade, plurilinguismo, feminismos, saberes ancestrais, biopolítica, conhecimentos indígenas, deconstrução de categorias ocidentais e do antropocentrismo, com foco nessa libertação animal. Então, a disciplina ela está pensada em 4 módulos, e eu convido as pessoas a acessar o site do PPG-HDL para conhecer ali toda a ementa, e a gente segue, então, um pouco a nossa conversa aqui. Eu acho que a gente pode, talvez, trazer 2 pontos. O que o professor Matuck perguntou para o professor Nocek, que talvez você já possa repetir para ele, professor Matuck, por favor. E a outra, eu queria perguntar um pouco para o professor Nocek, how excited you are about the fact that Brazil and specifically the University of São Paulo is going to host the next conference next year. So what do you think is going to be different this time? So your society has organized more than 30 different conferences so far. So next year that's going to happen in the global south in Brazil. So I'd like you to share some ideas about how do you expect it to happen? And I think Professor Artur Matuck mentioned something that he wanted to ask you too. So Matuck, please feel free to make your question to Professor Nocek, please.
Yes, I feel that there is a lot of paradigm change in the arts, in the humanities, in social sciences, but not as much in hard sciences. Although I have been following the Galileo Commission, which I found incredible. I'm not sure they are really widespread in the United States, but they are more in Europe, maybe in England. But they congregate a lot of scientists that challenge the materialistic paradigm. And I wonder what you think about this. And my curiosity also is to know if in previous meetings of SLSA, if people mention questions about animal rights, eventually I think they do, and also about spirituality, and also like if the spiritual world is discussed as something that science should look into it also. Okay, that's it.
Wow, a lot there. Okay. Let's. I'll start with the first question, or sort of set of reflections. And first of all, thank you, Artur. I couldn't. Beautiful presentation. Look, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the lack of transformation. The sciences, or I will say, maybe I should sort of. I should put this. Qualify this by saying mainstream sciences, because I think that there's a difference between people, you could say, on the fringes of mainstream science. And what I mean by mainstream science is the sort of those participating in the business of science, getting large-scale grants, running laboratories, doing large-scale experiments that require government funding dollars, that require massive laboratories, bodies, and so on, basically a labor force. And I think that those people in the mainstream sciences are deeply resistant to the kind of paradigm shifts that we're seeing happen within, you could say the humanities, social sciences, and arts. Mostly, and I'll just sort of keep this brief, a lot of this has to do with this sort of a kind of resistance to the plurality of values that need to be presumed in order to do the kind of post-anthropocentric work we're talking about. And what I mean by that is, when you're asking the question of normative ethics, and the sort of history of normative ethics and so on, right? The norms of scientific practice, especially under the sort of regime of of techno-scientific practice, has to do with the sort of domination of one set of values. And those values have to do with the material calculation of the universe, that have to do with the reduction of systems to predictable patterns, that ultimately algorithms, can, and now we're in the era where deep learning systems are sort of taking over molecular biology, especially molecular biology, but also sort of protein folding and so on, is that they're using deep neural networks to do that work, and that basically we're approximating computable functions, and the universe has to be rendered computable. We might not know what the algorithm is, but also ultimately there's a presumption that with enough data and with sophisticated enough machines, we will be able to approximate a function. I mean, this is just a long and complicated way of talking about how one set of values sort of dictate what mainstream sciences are able to sort of produce and call that quote unquote knowledge. You have, of course, and on the fringes of that, you have people doing sort of, really interesting work in ecosystem science and theoretical biology and, cell biology and work in cancer research that's not happening exclusively through molecular biology, and they're asking really, really interesting questions, right? And they're also asking questions in climate sciences and so on. This is where you see, scientific rebellion and these kinds of activists within the sciences doing really important work, but they're also not getting funding. They're not getting funding the way the mainstream my mainstream colleagues who basically are, I've just co-authored a book with a mathematician and computer scientist who basically said that sciences have a crisis in meaning right now. And their crisis in meaning has to do with the fact that there's no science left in science. It's all technoscience. And technoscience is what dictates the value. So basically my sort of, I could have a much longer spiel on this, but I think you're totally right. And I think a lot of this has to do with the inability to embrace a plurality of values and thinking about the sort of epistemic pluralism and the kind of ethics that comes out of that. I mean, right now, mainstream science is unable to do that when it's dictated by data science. I guess that would be one response to that. I mean, the other response, has to do with, are people talking about, animal ethics and so on at SLSA? Absolutely. I mean, animal studies has a very, very long history of having a home at SLSA, and a lot of the really interesting work coming out of multi-species and more than human ethics, happens at SLSA for sure. And then the other question, I think that was the first question by Paulo. What's different about having SLSA in Brazil? I think it's absolutely necessary. We've been talking about, the global, a lot of people are talking about the global South and how absolutely essential it is to be paying attention to the global South as the global majority, but we've never had a conference in the global South. And thinking about the SLSA being North American centric is a problem, and we'd like to think about it as the Americas.
Perfect. So maybe I'd like to make another question. So as far as I understand, we're currently witnessing a particularly sad moment nowadays where xenophobia and racism have been increasing. So I wanted to ask both of you, how do you see the relation between epistemic justice and the knowledge and experiences of refugees, immigrants, and stateless people, and also the recognition and integration of the knowledge and experiences shared by people in situations of displacement, including Arabs, Africans, and South Americans. So please, I'd like you to develop a little bit about how do you see this interaction between epistemic justice and the knowledge produced by people in this situation of refuge or migration in general?
Artur, you want to jump on this one, or do you?
Matuck, se você quiser começar, fique à vontade, como você achar melhor, tudo bem?
Na verdade, eu pensei que você estava conversando mais com ele mesmo, mas não sei, eu não sei se eu entendi.
Tranquilo, seria para vocês dois. Estou mencionando primeiro esse fato, né, de que há atualmente um crescimento notável da xenofobia e do racismo, né? Claro, a gente pode pensar no caso dos Estados Unidos, mas também no caso do Brasil, e aí eu pergunto justamente, nesse momento em que a xenofobia cresce no mundo como um todo, como vocês veem essa relação entre justiça epistêmica e o conhecimento e a experiência de pessoas refugiadas, imigrantes, apátridas? Vocês veem uma interconexão e, né, qual a importância de valorizar esses saberes produzidos por pessoas em situação de refúgio e apatridia?
Bom, eu vou falar bem rapidamente o que eu penso. E eu acho assim que as pessoas que são de movimentos sociais, que querem favorecer o imigrante, o estrangeiro, o negro, o indígena, os pobres, são hiper bem intencionados. Mas muitas vezes esses movimentos da esquerda, né, eles não têm a necessária autocrítica, por exemplo, e muitas vezes eles reproduzem um comportamento agressivo contra as pessoas de direita ou contra as pessoas que não pensam como eles, né? Então, eu acho que esse é um perigo do ser humano achar que ele está sempre certo e os outros estão sempre errados, os seus inimigos, os seus opositores, e que diante dessa ilusão de que os outros estão sempre errados, nós podemos ser agressivos. Então, eu já vi muito trabalho de arte, que o trabalho de arte ou as aulas são exatamente para mostrar como que os bolsonaristas, o pessoal da direita é ridículo, idiota e tudo mais. E eu acho que a gente está passando por um momento super complexo. Eu não acho que o pessoal da direita tem razão, né, de expressar ódio, de oprimir os outros, mas ao mesmo tempo, assim, a gente tem que se educar para não reproduzir esse comportamento agressivo, vingativo, perturbador. So, I don't know if I should explain to Adam what I just say or not.
Maybe it would be interesting just to make a short version of what you said.
What I just say is that, you know, in Brazil, there's a lot of good social movements, you know, to enhance Blacks, indigenous people, poor people. But sometimes people from the left or people who are they intend to do their best, they end up being very vingative, very aggressive towards other people, just because, you know, other people do not think exactly as they do. So I think that's a very tragic situation, I think. I don't know. Maybe this is very simplistic too. Okay,
so Professor Nocek, thank you very much, Matuck. So Professor Nocek, if you want to comment on that, please feel free.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's a very complex question. I think what we are witnessing, of course, and it's almost uninteresting to say it, or for me to say this, is the sort of limitations of sort of Western epistemic paradigms, especially when it comes to thinking about who is and is not deserving of rights. I think one of the difficulties right now is that we're realizing the limitations of something like a nation state, and as the state as the nation state as the ultimate determiner of rights, and when you have somebody, you know, and obviously somebody like Hannah Arendt, Hannah Arendt noticed already very early on the contradiction between the nation and the state, and when the state becomes in the service of protecting an identity, which is the national identity, then you have a deep problem, because the state itself seems to not serve the plurality it actually needs to serve, but serves an identity. But then when you have the states as the ultimate guarantor of rights, then when we have the sort of world that we live in right now, and I won't say much more about that, but then you realize the real struggle, because we don't really understand or have a robust legal discourse around this is maybe where the law comes in, and I think Artur was talking about how important the law is. We don't have a robust legal discourse about the securing of human rights outside of the nation state, and I think this is one of the things that this brings to the fore the question of normative ethics, legal ethics, cosmopolitanism, and decolonial ethics. And I could say more, but these are the kinds of questions that I'm really thinking about, and I think the question of epistemic justice gets to the heart of that.
Perfect. So there's a question sent by Professor Artur Matuck. First one is for Professor Nocek. The question says, how does computational design constitute a locus where political dynamics, economic struggles, and ecological forms of engagement intersect and materialize? So, meaning in what ways does computational design operate as a site of political action, economic struggle, and ecological engagement?
Ooh, big one. It's getting into the heart of the book I just wrote. Okay. I could say, if we're thinking, computational design needs to be qualified in certain ways. What do we mean by computation? Do we mean it by the design, the forms of design that algorithms, that computers are just already engaged with? Or are we thinking about very specific forms of computational design, like a la the way architects, industrial designers, and so on use computational systems? One of the things I'm interested in is a much more expansive understanding of computing that spans how designers talk about it, but also how it is that computers are just designing in this world right now. They are designing the basic infrastructure and the basic conditions under which, we engage in our worlds as embodied subjects, in ways that we pay attention to and ways that we often don't pay attention to. So that kind of designing capability is already a sort of, we have to think about it politically. We can't not think about the conditioning of our environments in a sort of apolitical way. And, when you think about the different kinds of computing systems, if we're talking about neural networks, deep learning systems, and so on, the way in which these systems are trained, you can't not think about how it is that different kinds of political paradigm, they're influenced by different sorts of political paradigms. They are, they are trained in racist, biased ways, and I think a lot of people have done really good work in thinking about this. But also the ways in which that is transformed in very politically manipulative ways. So thinking about sort of computational design, I don't want to take I could go on for a long time, but thinking about the way computing, politics come together through design, and thinking about design is more expansive than what, say, the architect or the industrial designer thinks about it, but design as a way of thinking about computational world building, it has to be a site of political, economic, and social struggle. I don't know if that answers the question, but it's the sort of tip of the iceberg.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it does. So once linguistic diversity and promotion of multilingualism as a condition for epistemic justice and resistance to the silencing of historically excluded voices is something quite important for us and for this international conference that's going to happen next year. Please, I'd like to hear your final considerations in any language that you want to make, in English, in Portuguese, in Arabic, or in whatever language you would like to do. And please, to invite both Professor Nocek and Professor Matuck to give their final considerations, please.
Well, I had the opportunity to study in the United States in the 70s and the 80s. So, and also in the 90s. So I visit many American universities, and I was mostly in communication and arts. But I think I enjoy and I learn so much in these universities in America. And then I'm really enthusiastic about this connection with the Society for Literature, Science, and the Arts, because for me it's like a passion, like to mix languages and mix fields, and then I feel that it's part of my concern, of my research, of my passion to connect with America and also with Europe. And I've been to Canada and France too, and I really enjoy traveling, because I think every time we travel, it seems that we change our own identity, our own personality. And for me, this connection with SLSA, which I have heard about it, and I've never been into one of your conferences, and that's sad, because I wish I had. And then I'm very happy that this could be happening at USP, and I want to thank Paulo Farah for his acceptance of this proposal to make this connection with this American society. And I think we're learning a lot, and also we're forming this incredible team of people here in São Paulo that are willing and endeavoring to work and make this happen with a lot of enthusiasm. At the same time, I am afraid, I am concerned that we may not be able to do as much as we would like, and maybe we're not going to have funds or something. There's a lot of concerns. And people have been asking, like one of our collaborators today, she asked me, so if we don't get funded, how are we going to do it? And I said, well, we're going to do it anyway. So we're going to do it maybe less spectacular or less incredible, but we're going to do it anyway. So that's it. I'm glad this is really happening. It's like a dream that we can learn from each other. Okay.
No, that's great. No, thank you for that. No, we're incredibly excited about this. I think that it's interesting that you said that as we travel, we change. It makes me think that SLSA is traveling, and the hope is it will change as well in this travel. And it will become more pluralistic and expansive in the right ways. One of the things that attracted me, just to go back to your question about the sort of the linguistic and disciplinary and cultural pluralism that you were talking about, although I think this is obviously at the heart of the SLSA, but I also think that it's not something that we should take for granted. This is one of the worries I always have about bringing and mixing epistemologies and disciplines is this desire for a quote unquote shared language, which kind of sometimes irritates me because what happens with these shared languages is that a lot gets lost and flattened without maintaining that heterogeneity, that sort of that pluralism at the heart of it. That's always happens with me as a philosopher working in the sciences, is that usually my language gets flattened because they have more money, but they call it interdisciplinary. But it's like, no, this is not interdisciplinary. This is just, you have more money. But And one discourse becomes sort of all-encompassing and absorbs them all, and this is exactly what we can't do. So one of the things that I think is really nice about the SLSA, at least in my experience being involved with it, and I've been involved since I was a grad student, is the way in which it's always changing, it's always mutating, always transforming. There's always a new sort of center of activity, and it stays. And we need it now geographical pluralism as much as we do epistemic pluralism. So this is what we're excited about. So it's an honor for us to be in collaboration with you.
Great.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to having you in Brazil and hosting the next conference. So I would really like to thank both of you and all the audience that we are having. And of course, this panel is going to stay on YouTube, so anyone can watch it at any time. And I just want to invite everyone for the panel that we are going to have tomorrow on the judiciary and its role for the promotion of human rights and for expanding access to the university. Então, pessoal, estão todas, todes e todos convidados para amanhã, para o nosso debate sobre poder judiciário para a promoção dos direitos humanos e para ampliação do acesso à universidade. Vai acontecer amanhã, a partir das 19 horas, também por meio do canal no YouTube do PPG-HDL, né? Então, os participantes do debate de amanhã vão ser o juiz Eduardo Rezende Melo, né? Com certeza vai trazer uma contribuição muito importante, assim como teremos uma outra contribuição fundamental da professora e advogada Elizabeth da Silva Montesano. Esse debate vai contar com a mediação do professor Artur Oriel Pereira e com a moderação no YouTube de Adam Melo Rodrigues da Silva. Né? Queria aproveitar a oportunidade para mais uma vez agradecer o Adam Melo também, parceiro que está sempre com a gente aí, né, na frente, tanto na pesquisa quanto na organização de eventos. Então, estejam todos, todas e todes convidados, convidadas e convidades para amanhã. Nos vemos amanhã, então. Tá bom? Forte abraço.